Welcome to Love Always Self. I'm Shira.
Hi, y'all. I'm Karista, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Love Always Self. We are super excited today because we have an amazing guest on. We have Barbara Nadalini Priesnitz, and she is a licensed professional counselor who is dedicated to helping people find truth and meaning in their lives, as well as relief from pain and anxiety. She has been practicing in Austin since 2013 with specific training in regression therapy from Dr. Brian Weiss, who is the author of Many Lives, Many Masters. Before becoming a therapist, Barbara owned and operated a restaurant in the late 90s and had a career in information technology. And she has been raising her family and been based out of Austin, Texas. Thank you so much for joining us, Barbara.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes. After both of us being able to have a past life regression with you, our minds were blown, and we have been just seeing different synchronicities pop up throughout our lives that we see connections now in those past lives that we experienced during the regression. So we just really wanted to bring you on because this past life regression therapy is an incredible tool, and we just wanted to bring it to light to more people. So Barbara, you have been practicing since 2013. Can you share with us and our audience about what a past life regression is?
Yeah. So past life regression is similar to age regression, which is a fairly mainstream therapeutic technique, which is to go into a hypnotic state. And I can explain that in a minute. And have access to sort of subconscious memories, usually memories from early in childhood, even infancy. People have remembered in utero experiences. You know, our brains don't store those types of memories for a lot of different reasons, the same way that we store our memories as adults or even older children. So regression is really a hypnotic process to access older memories that are typically hard to remember. Hypnosis itself is not that out there at all. It's just a change in your brainwave frequency. You know, it takes us out. There's only 4 human primary brainwave frequencies. There's beta, alpha, theta, delta. We're in beta whenever you're awake, working, thinking, talking. When you take just a quick breather, relax, look out the window, stop thinking words, you drop into alpha. You do this all day long. And then sometimes you drop into theta while you're awake, daydreaming, lost in thought, driving home, and suddenly you're at home and you don't remember getting off the highway. That's theta. But also theta is in deep sleep, not the deepest sleep, but some of our dreaming, when you're just falling asleep, when you're just waking up. It's way more complicated than I'm putting it, but basically the hypnotic phenomena that come with a deep state of relaxation include dissociation, time distortion. There's a lot of other, frankly, very therapeutic elements just to going into a trance, right? You change your thought process. It's kind of trippy. And so that's how we can get into this. If you believe you have a soul, which I do, and your soul has access to all of its memories, all of its awareness, or maybe not all, but as much as our brains can process, okay, in these bodies, then the idea is that we can go into this hypnotic trance and the deepest possible trance and access those memories, okay? If you don't believe you have a soul, I still think it can be really therapeutic, and I've seen it be really therapeutic because those people who aren't sure or who really don't want to go there spiritually yet, whatever comes up in their regression, if they are considering that a projection of their subconscious, of their, deepest unconscious desires, fears, whatever, it's still useful therapeutically to them. But frankly, most of the people that come do believe they have a soul, or they're looking for validation, confirmation, and experience to help them be more confident or comfortable about that.
Wow. It's well said. And, when somebody is feeling inclined to do a past life regression, I mean, can you tell us maybe like how a PLR can be useful for them to do this?
Okay. I think there's so many different reasons to do regression. The majority of people come in saying, I really want to get a better sense of my purpose.
Yeah.
And they're hoping that having this experience will give them a sense of their purpose. And I think it does, just not in the direct way that people think.
Definitely agree.
Yeah. Okay. Some people come in and say, I just am curious. I'm curious. I have a sense that I've lived other lives. There's people, there are places that I can't explain. There's things that I know that I shouldn't be able to know. And they really are looking for validation that they're not nuts. And they definitely get that.
Yeah.
Most people are worried that it won't work for them. Okay. And I have tried to stay really humble and not boastful about this, but I have a very high success rate. And I attribute that mostly to doing a consult. It's not like some magic I have. I think that to have a good regression experience, you have to be able to get into a deep enough trance. And to get into a deep enough trance, you have to feel safe. And there's almost no way you're going to walk into a stranger's office and lay down and close your eyes and bare your neck, because we did not evolve to do that.
That makes
So
sense.
once I started doing the consults, well, I had consults optional for the first few years. And it took me way too long to figure out that the people who did the consults had a much easier time. The people who didn't, or even today, the people who struggle, they can still get there. It just takes a little longer. It's a little more trudgy. It's like kind of walking uphill more than just walking. Or so I think just a 30-minute Zoom consult, your subconscious brain is deciding if I'm safe or not.
Yeah.
It's that simple, I think. And then also I can tell you what to expect. And, the brain doesn't really like regression, or at least past life regression. So preparing people for that pushback can really help, because it doesn't matter, you, me, the gurus, if you have a functioning human brain, it's going to say, wait a minute, I don't remember that. Right? If you get a memory from when you're 3, your brain might say, okay, yeah, that syncs with what I know. But if you get a memory that doesn't sync with this current lifetime, this body, this family, the brain will just be screaming. And so there are ways to manage that.
Yeah, it's so interesting how our brain filters so much out. Like, we have no idea all the things that we're missing in our day-to-day frequently. And then to also cause certain memories to kind of go into hiding. And that's what we're doing, is we're peeling back the
it's
veil
intentional,
or the door.
right? There's a reason we don't remember everything. It would be way overload, right?
Yes.
There's a reason we have amnesia when we come into these lifetimes. We're here to learn and grow, I think, is the most simple thing. If you want to know your purpose at the highest level, it's to learn and grow. And sometimes to help others, and sometimes to work through stuff. But ultimately, we are all here to learn and grow. And if we remembered everything and sort of came down here, with divine consciousness and power
and awareness
maximally, it's like, if you already know algebra, you can't go through the effort of learning algebra. So
it's like we'd have all the cheat codes to the game.
Right? Yeah. Play, you got to forget the rules and learn them again. It makes it harder, right? So back to your question, most people are worried about, does it work? Most people want to know their purpose. They want some validation. It's really therapeutic, I think, for anyone. I'm a regular therapist. I do mostly talk therapy and clinical hypnosis, normal. And it's great. I love my therapy practice. Regression is the most profound therapeutic technique I use. And the people who do regression, a lot of them come and do some therapy afterwards too, either to process what came up in their regression or just to do regular therapy in a context where you can talk about your purpose with this sort of spiritual context that's not only focused on spiritual growth, because life is hard and we have to deal with shit all day long, and it's good to have tools. But when you have that bigger context with your therapist, I think it can help. And there are a lot of other therapists who share that context.
So I'm curious. I really want to dive more into hypnosis. But first, I want to know what led you to the career shift, because originally, you had said that you ran a restaurant and you were in IT. So what was the catalyst to the career shift?
Well, when I was about 30, 32, I don't know, I'm 54 now. My youngest brother, I'm the oldest of 5. My youngest brother, who's 10 years younger than me, read Many Lives, Many Masters. And he came to me and said, "Hey, I read this book. You should really read it." And he had gone and done a regression with a psychologist who was doing regressions in Austin at that time. She was in her 70s then and has since passed. And I read the book and I found it really fascinating and interesting. But I was in a stage of my growth where I had rejected the religion of my childhood and not found or even really looked very hard to replace that with anything. And so I was into my intellect and the intellectual world. And the way I interpreted that was that not just religious concepts were, I don't want to get into knocking religion. I think there's a lot of wonderful things about a lot of wonderful religions, but I was really in a state of avoiding that. In fact, I was very triggered by certain religious terminology. And so I was skeptical. And when I had the experience I had, so I read the book, I went and did a regression, and I had this like life-changing experience in my first regression. And I want to say it took me 5 or 6 years to make sense of that. And when I say make sense of that, it was very clear. I mean, the lifetimes I remembered were very clear. I know what happened. I know where I was. I know how I felt. I could talk about that more later. So it wasn't like I needed to make sense of what it was. It's just that if that was real, that meant that I really did have a soul. And if I really did have a soul, it meant we all have souls. And if we all have souls, we're here on purpose. And if we're all here on purpose, I mean, there was these ripple effects that I wasn't prepared for. And that's what took me the longest. And I was young. I mean, youth is different for everybody. I was young at 32, right? I was still in so many ways naive about a lot of things. So it took me a long time. And then I really wanted to do more regression work. And I did workshops with Dr. Weiss. This is back, more than 20 years ago. And then I got divorced, like for the second time. This is also about 20 years ago, not quite, almost. And I went into therapy, like regular, and I had a trauma history in my childhood, and it was all only coming out in my relationships. And so that's when I really got into therapy. It was around 34 or so. And I did 2 years of pretty intense talk therapy. And my therapist was in her 70s, and she was a religious person. And in fact, her husband was a Baptist minister. And she had this Bible. And I remember thinking, what are the chances that sort of the universe would take me to this woman to help me? Because I ended up also processing a lot of my baggage with the Catholic Church, etc. Anyway, the career. So this is all practical, guys. She was in her 70s, and you had to leave your money on the counter. When you left, somebody else came in. And I was divorced for the second time with a child. And, you know, my daughter's father was like a poet. Basically, I had no child support. And so I thought, I'm going to have to work forever. And I loved the therapy. It really helped me so much. And I thought, I want to do this so that I can work well. In fact, it's one of the few careers you get better and better at as you get older. Because in IT at 40, by 40, you know, the young developers were like, my mom has that sweater.
Yeah.
And they just saw me as so old. So I knew I would age out of that, and I didn't want to go into sales or management. So that's why I decided to do it. Then I really wanted to do regression, but I was very uncomfortable still with how woo it was. Very embarrassed really about it. Like part of me was all about it, and part of me was like, I can't believe I'm going to do this. And I still have a little of that, I got to tell you. I mean, now it's more like 98% and 2%. And back then it was probably like 75-25. But yeah. So I went back to school, and I didn't want to do regression. I wanted to be as legitimate as I could be. So I did all this post-grad training in clinical hypnosis. And then, so I took it very deliberately in these steps. And then finally I did the training with Dr. Weiss, and I love it.
Yeah, I have questions there, for sure. Many of us, including our audience and Carrie and myself, we've read Many Lives, Many Masters. I would probably say that when I first discovered past life regressions, referred to as PLRs for those listening, it was his work that really made me more fascinated in the topic as I was undergoing my own, you know, what is my life's purpose? Is there more to me than what we've been told? Questioning, right? And while looking at his work, I was like, I wonder if anyone locally does that. And what was interesting is finding you and that you had studied with him. And I was like, how is that possible that someone locally, you know, that form of synchronicity that we just kind of like get handed. And so I'm super curious, like, how did you end up studying directly with someone that we're all so fascinated by?
Yeah. He's still teaching, I think maybe once a year. I don't know with the pandemic. But he does therapist trainings. He was doing them at least twice a year at the Omega Center in New York, in upstate New York. And there was a 2-year waiting list. And I was on the waiting list. It took me 2 years to get a spot because it was a week-long therapy training, and he took 150 people, which, you know, may sound like a lot of people, but it's not that big of a group to spend a week together and work with him and his wife, who's also a therapist and a regression therapist. And he regressed me. You know, it's one of those things where they're like, he did 2 or 3 demonstration sessions a day, and then we would go practice in small groups, and he would lecture. And so each time he did a demonstration, he'd say, okay, who wants to come up here? And everybody would raise their hand. And, you know, I raised my hand, and he said, okay, you in the glasses. And I was like, me? I couldn't believe it. And it was a really, you know, that was a whole other interesting, beautiful experience.
Wow.
So I kind of want to circle, like, first off, like, how amazing to get to study with Brian Weiss. Like, I don't know, I consider him maybe like the GOAT.
He's really just as lovely and humble and strong and kind and gentle as he seems in his books. And if you've watched him on YouTube or seen him, he's lovely. Yeah.
Amazing.
I think it's reflected definitely in his writings as well. Like, just it's so apparent the passion that he has for helping people and supporting and just assisting people and creating their own awareness. And I wanted to ask more about hypnosis itself. So if I hadn't have read Many Lives, Many Masters and read about what it was like to be under hypnosis, I would have probably had a little bit more, fear, anxiety coming into the session.
Yeah.
So what is hypnosis and what is it not?
Well, easy to start with what it's not. It's not like on TV or the movies or even in a comedy club. Hypnosis, the teachers say all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. Okay. I can't make you relax, right? Nobody can make you relax. And hypnosis is a state of focused awareness. It's a state of deep relaxation where you're not asleep. Nobody can make you do that. You can choose that. It's all volitional. The therapist or the hypnotist, as lay hypnotists are that are not also therapists or psychologists or doctors, can facilitate it, but you have to decide, I'm in a safe place. I want to do this for any number of reasons, and I'm going to allow this person to help me get into this state. Okay, so those are the biggest pieces about it. When you see in the comedy club, can I have a volunteer? There's a hypnotist on the stage and somebody raises their hand. As soon as they raise their hand, they're self-selecting for, I want to go up there and be goofy on stage. I'm willing to do that. And so they go and they are volitionally participating and doing goofy things. I promise you, if you told them to do something that they really didn't want to do, they would have the ability to not do it. Okay. So it's really, and that's true in regression here too. And I tell people, you can move your body, you can scratch your nose, you can talk, you could open your eyes and sit up at any time. You can people get up and go to the bathroom in the middle and maintain their trance. And that alone should be evidence, it's an intentional state. I can help you get there because I do a 25-minute progressive relaxation induction. And frankly, that's the net that can catch everybody. Everybody will get there. But
that's a good one.
Yeah. So it's not losing control of ourselves or disconnecting from our body.
No, you have full integrity of your person and your body the whole time. And there is some consciousness that will chatter at you. And your little internal observer and internal critic will be going the whole time. It's like you're not that out of it.
Yeah, I actually had a coworker that I was discussing doing this with, and this was before I met with you a couple weeks ago. And she was like, wait, is it still going to be you when you're done? Is that still going to be you, or is it going to be somebody else? And she was like kind of freaked out. And I was like, no, I'm still connected to my body. I'm not disconnecting and going away.
No, you don't. This is not an out of body experience. But people do have a lot of misconceptions. And there are some people, in fact, my old therapist, who as I said, was a religious person, she told me that a lot of people in her spiritual practice believe that when you go into a state of meditation, even much less hypnosis, that the devil can basically get in you or something. And I don't believe that. But there are a lot of people who have beliefs that are terrifying. If you really believe that would be terrifying, right?
Absolutely.
And so I'm very empathetic about it. But it's not for everybody. I mean, it could be for everybody, but what we expect to see is what we get. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've obviously regressed a lot of people over the past almost decade. And what's common for experiences as far as being able to access one or two lives, or are there in between life experiences?
All of the above. It's really about the window of time and how much content people remember from any one particular lifetime. I do a 2-hour window. They're not all the exact same length, obviously, because, everybody's different and I have no idea what people are going to see or do or say. So there's a window of 2 hours. we spend 5 or 10 minutes connecting when you first arrive, and there's 5 minutes or sometimes a few more minutes at the end. But the actual regression is a 25-minute induction, and then there's an hour to an hour and 15 in the regression. And during that, say, hour and 10 minutes that you're actively in the regression, some people get through just one because there's a lot of content that comes up. Some people get through 5 or 6 and only remember 1 or 2 things from each lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not dictating that, and they're not dictating it either. That's just what's coming. We kind of follow the ball, so everybody's different. I would say on average, most people get through 2,
Mm-hmm.
With more or less detail, and definitely in between. Once they go through the memory of a lifetime and they go through the memory of a death, and I should talk about that at some point. I don't know when you want me to, but remembering what it's like to die is an important piece. But once your soul leaves that body and you're remembering, it sounds weird, but once your soul's not in that memory anymore and you're in this state, you're sort of in a disembodied access state, and you can talk to your guides. Sometimes about half the time people can talk to their guides. About a quarter of the time people ask their guides and the guides respond and say, no, we're not going to talk to you right now. And then, about a quarter of the time they don't get any kind of response.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, people have all of these types of experiences, but most people get through about 2. And we go from significant event to significant event. So these jumps, sometimes they're 2 months and sometimes they're 40 years. And I'm not saying when to go to. Some regression therapists do say, go 20 years in the future or go to the end of the life. I don't practice it that way. But there's a lot of different ways to practice.
So I definitely want you to share with us about what that's like walking through one of the deaths. But I did have a question come up in my mind. And have you ever encountered anyone experiencing a non-earthly life?
Yes.
I'm going to raise my hand on this one. I'm one of those.
Okay. A few, right? More than a handful, but not like dozens.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who remember that stuff, this is all I can tell you is these are really normal people. This is not like someone comes in all kind of wild and determined to remember something crazy. It's not like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, people remember things that I tell people all the time, don't try to make sense of it. You're going to be in it. You're going to be having this experience, being in this state, and your brain is going to be out here going, wait a minute, that's not possible. What is that? That doesn't make sense. And I'll constantly encourage and remind people, don't try to make sense of it. Just let's keep being open to what's coming up and the experience. You can process it and analyze it and think about it and decide what you think about it for the rest of your life. But when you're in the experience, you just go with it. Okay.
Yeah.
People have remembered a lot of stuff that's pretty out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say out there, I mean non-standard. Non-standard concepts. And I at this point, after everything I've seen and heard, and by the way, everything I've seen and heard by doing regressions with people facilitating regressions, if I had any skeptical doubt or anything when I went into this as a therapist 10 years ago, I have none now. I still have a tiny piece of me that thinks it's weird and is kind of embarrassed to talk about it with my mom. But I have zero skepticism or intellectual doubt. I've just heard too much stuff and it's so consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It's so consistent across people from all different places in the world, different native languages, different native religions, different levels of education, you name it. The consistency is striking. And so I feel really privileged to have had that experience and see that.
Yeah. So as I raised my hand just a second ago, I'm one of those individuals that had a experience of seeing a non-human representation of me. And following that session, during my experience, I was seeing these, what would be hands, manipulating some kind of crystal that looked like I don't know, like some kind of a lotus flower or something. And after that, I noticed that everywhere I went, I was seeing that flower of some sort, like everywhere. I think it was like a dandelion. I'm sorry, not a lotus. It would look more like a dandelion. And everywhere I went, I think I went shopping with my husband shortly after that. And I saw this ginormous framed picture of a dandelion. And I was like, what is happening right now? And I was in the beginning, just to kind of help validate what she's saying. Like I was in the beginning of my exploration of the topics of everything. Right. And I was a little blown away, especially listening back to that. I was like, what?
So I want to circle back to walking through a death. Now, I know that when I said I was going to do this, it really triggered a lot of fear in other people. Oh my God, that's so scary. And, granted, I don't have a lot of fear around death, maybe the dying process of the physical body I'm not looking forward to. But, tell us more about walking through people's deaths.
I think regardless of the content of your regression, which lifetimes you remember and which elements of those lives you remember and why, and what are the emotions with that, that's different from person to person, even though there's a lot of themes, because there's a fairly limited range of human struggling. We all do it, but it's the same kinds of struggling. But the deaths, when you remember what it's like to die, when you remember the difference between, okay, my soul is in this body that for any number of reasons is dying, and now my soul has left the body, the sensation is so consistent across all people of the relief and the just emptiness, lightness, freedom that comes from that. And it doesn't matter if the death is a natural death, illness, accident, violence, it doesn't matter. The experience people have when the soul leaves the body is so profoundly consistent and so relieving. It can really take away your fear of death, not just your own death. I think we all have a built-in evolutionary instinct to survive, but fear of death of our loved ones, death of our pets, just death in general, a different understanding of death. And I will say that that can be a life-changing experience, just that, having a change in your fear of death, really change your whole experience of living. And I it's easy to say, oh, I think I've relieved my fear of death, but you don't really know until the rubber meets the road, right?
That's
and
fair.
I can say that my husband passed away 2 years ago after a long illness. And we were very close. Yeah, thanks. And I was really, leading up to it, we knew he was terminal at diagnosis and ended up living a lot more years, which was wonderful, but we knew that he would die eventually. And I remember thinking, just in the back of my mind, I wonder if my practice and my knowing will hold up under the grief or under the loss of him. And it did. I was really relieved, not really shocked or anything, but I was a little bit relieved to find that those changes that I have experienced as a result of my learning, my knowing, my sharing, still held up even when it, was my turn to suffer again.
Yeah.
So I really think that can, on its own, can be a life-changing experience to remember what that's like.
Thank you for sharing that with
Yeah,
us.
thank you. I remember seeing my grandmother between lives, and I remember the expression of a love that I had never felt in this experience. And I was curious while you were explaining that, like, have you, like, during your sessions, and do you ever come across the guides wanting to talk to you or having conversations with you directly?
Yeah. With me as the therapist?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's happened about 3 times in the last, 8, 9 years. And when it happened the first time, I was really unprepared for that. And I even felt like I was taking up space of this person's regression experience. Like, hey, wait a minute, let's keep it about her. But it's a very humbling experience.
Yeah.
To receive any kind of input
That's
amazing through someone else. Yeah.
What an honor.
Yeah.
An honor. Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful.
It's not a common occurrence. It doesn't happen every year.
I was wondering something, this question mostly comes from my own experience. And I feel like, Carrie, you had a little bit of some of these as well, but after you experience this form of hypnosis or going through the PLR, the after effects, like immediately after, is it typical for anyone to experience potentially like some nausea or headaches or light sensitivity for a period of time that seems to be a little bit longer than when you close your eyes for a minute and wake up, or like open your eyes again,
Did you have that experience?
I had a very wild one. I don't know what, maybe I
like
just
a physical experience afterwards.
Yeah.
Most people don't have that. I haven't heard that reported.
Interesting.
Definitely, people need a little time to kind of reorient. And I tell people, don't schedule anything for a couple of hours after this, or, but no, I haven't really heard. I'm sure some people clearly have had these experiences. I haven't, but I don't think it's typical.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you a very wild story.
Okay, tell me.
So, yeah, after I got back in my car, and that day was just so fascinating. I mean, the fact that I listened to Rain and Thunderstorms on the like ALEXA so she doesn't activate at night to sleep. And then the day that I went in for my session with you, it was storming pretty heavily. So that really helped settle me in, which is interesting because I thought that I wasn't going to be able to do it, because I've actually been to one of those comedy shows where, I was with my spouse at the time and he got all hypnotized in the audience. And I'm like looking at him like, what's happening? And nothing happened to me. So I didn't think that I was going to be able to get through it. Definitely not what happened. So afterwards, though, I got to the car and I experienced what felt like a migraine. And light was very, very different. The colors were different. The lightness was different.
Wow.
I didn't have any water with me in the car. And so as soon as I got home and took one sip of water, all of it went away. It was almost like it just grounded me immediately. And then my favorite part is I had family over because it was my birthday weekend, and I had family over and they were like, what's going on with your hair? And I was like, what do you mean my hair? And I thought they were teasing me, but it turned out I had a white streak of hair that wasn't there when I was doing my hair on my way to your appointment. And it lasted until it grew out. So
that is very interesting. And I mean, that's a very outlier kind of experience.
Absolutely.
But again, nothing to me sounds impossible anymore. I've heard some really wild stuff, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, there you go. Another thing that happens that we can't explain. I mean, we live in this great mystery all the time, and we get used to the boundaries of mystery. And then sometimes things happen that you're like, wow, that's outside the boundaries of even what I thought about mystery. But,
Yeah. Yeah. I'll share an image with you that I took.
Yeah, I'd love to see.
I'll
That's
send that
so
to
wild.
you. It was really wild. I was like, what? So I guess there's not really any of those, that's not a normal or common symptom after
I
following.
haven't heard that. And
Yeah.
people usually, I have water here, and people usually have something. And if I'll ask them, do you want some water? And most people bring some water with them these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to be even more at the end. I'll be like, do you want some water now?
Right.
I'm going to learn from that story.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting after reading the books by Brian Weiss was that not very rarely do these experiences, are we able to prove that they really happened?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we how can we reconcile that I don't know the word.
I have some response on this.
Okay.
Well, first of all, in my practice, I am seeking to help people frankly, with like anxiety and growth through having an experience that can profoundly alter how they see the world, how they see themselves, and how they move forward. The desire to find concrete information that can be validated is rare in my clients, but I have had one person who was able to go find the things that he saw. And not because he was the only one who remembered validatable information, but because he was really into doing that research. There's a whole department at the University of Virginia that does this type of work, and they've published lots of books with case studies of, what I can only call proven correlations between children who remembered past lives and they're able to go find the people, the place, the whatever. Fascinating. And Ian Stevenson, who I think has passed away a while back, but he authored a lot of those early books at the University of Virginia. And on my website, on the resources page, there's links to these books, but there's a lot of information. People have done a lot of research on correlating memories to actual events and places. I have lots of people who remember being in various wars. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of children who remember things like that. I have a number of people who come to see me because their kids are talking about, like, my airplane is, mm-hmm. crashing. And like a 3-year-old,
wow.
My airplane is crashing into the ocean, mommy, or you're not my real mommy. I want my real mommy. These things have been, that's just a little thing. There's even just in Austin, Texas in 2022, I have had just this year, a couple of mothers who have these long stories about what their kids are saying and doing. And then it leads the parent to say, okay, what is this? I want to explore this more. Most children forget mm-hmm. by that age 6, which is coincidentally around when the brain goes into sort of alpha as a predominant brainwave frequency, which is why children generally start school then. It's the introduction of concrete mm-hmm. logic, black and white thinking. So, there's a lot of evidence about children remembering mm-hmm. things that they couldn't possibly know.
Yes.
And
Wow.
those books are worth reading. I've read them. I've read some of them. Fascinating.
We'll
Yeah,
provide
I
links
remember.
below to this resources
Yeah.
page on your site, because this is a
Okay,
lot
good.
of really good
Yeah.
resources here.
I remember one of those stories, a young child who was named James ended up, they confirmed his story of dying in a war. He was also a James previously, and they were able to find the person that he was in combat with and verified all the information. Just
That just makes
wild.
me have goosebumps on my
I
head.
know. I was like, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah, that stuff, those stories, you know, one of the things that I really want to do, you know, we all have our list of things we really want to do. I really want to write a book about evidence, that what evidence really is, because we have so much evidence that is on its own not meaningful enough to be life changing. But if you made a list of all the things that have happened to you in your life that you cannot explain, or the things that you personally witnessed happen to someone else that you know cannot be explained, things like in these books, these very, you know, highly researched, you know, academic evidence of things, you would have a really profound list of evidence that the world is not really what we think it is, and not that, you know, it is what we think it is, and it's so much more. And so that kind of evidence, you know, we are looking for evidence. We're all looking for evidence, but the evidence is, I'm a soul. I'm here on purpose.
Yeah.
Everyone else is a soul. Everyone else is here on purpose. I mean, ultimately, all the evidence is about like that awareness.
That's fantastic.
Just thinking about treating everybody equally and with love, and, you know, just.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I kind of think that Earth is like a K through 12,
right? Bullying,
it's definitely a hard school.
This is not like graduate school.
No.
And there's a big range between K and 12, right? But it's kind of reassuring to know, like, if you looked at third graders and we're like, oh my God, those third graders are so immature and they're mean to each other and they're crying, and be like, well, they're not always going to be in third grade. I mean, these people are going to, and I don't mean that in a condescending, like,
No,
I don't know what my role is, right? I just know that we're all constantly growing and learning, and we have to do stupid shit sometimes as part of our, like, being where we're at. And
absolutely,
we have lots of growth that happens within each one lifetime sometimes, and then a lot of time over time. So I'm actually, even with all the stuff going on in the world, and you know, I'm very progressive in most every way, but I also am not that worried.
That's
in
funny.
the
I
sense
just said that yesterday.
You did, yeah. I have a lot of faith that this is just what we do, and yeah, it sucks, and I wish it could all be better. But I also don't think that the point is to all make it all better. The point is to learn and grow. And, you know, when I'm in the hammock with the lemonade, that's not when I'm doing my learning. Not that people should make it harder, but it's like, life is hard even when it's easy, it's hard.
Yeah,
right?
agreed. Wow. Thank you for
and
saying
while there's
that.
lots of lessons, don't forget to have a little fun in there too.
Yeah, I mean, we need the lemonade and the hammock and the games, and that's the refreshing, refilling. I mean, we just have to take care of ourselves, but and then life is so much easier in some ways here in, like, the US and the West, but it also means that there's more opportunity for internal struggle and internal learning. And we see a lot of that now, right? That's what we see. And so I think, you know, I'm very hopeful that we're here to learn and grow, and that this is part of it. And
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
So, will you share with us how people can find you and find out more information about working with you? And correct me if I'm wrong, you also do past life regressions via video chat as well, or no?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't prefer it, but I've done it certainly. Yeah. The one thing that I like to do when I do it on video is I want to see the person. Mm-hmm. So you have to set it up where basically I can watch you while you're laying mm-hmm. there with your eyes closed. I mean, maybe that's all in my head, but that's what I like to do for my practice. So yes, I can do it remotely, but I do like to see the person. Okay. They can reach me through my website. You can just actually go online and book a consult mm-hmm. if you want. And that's the first step. You can't book the regression yourself online because I like to meet people and talk to people first. But then at the end of the consult, I'll ask you if you're ready to schedule. And if you are, then we'll do it at that time. Yeah, I mean, I'm available. I love this work. It's an honor to do this work. It's an mm-hmm. honor to hear people's experiences. You know, one thing I haven't said is that it's very emotional. Mm-hmm. Most people cry. Most people viscerally feel really strong emotions in the course of their regression experience. And actually, they need to. I mean, that's part of the therapeutic strength of it is in experiencing those emotions and realizing that we have experienced and survived, and like that we learn from all this struggle. And anyway, it is really emotional. And so it's also an honor for me to hold that space for people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I'm sorry.
Sorry. You have two websites, correct?
I do. I keep them separate because mm-hmm. my therapy website, people can, file for out-of-network reimbursement with their mm-hmm. insurance, mm-hmm. and regression is not an approved modality. So I keep that separate so that it won't mess up the people who want to get reimbursed. So I have a therapy website and a regression website, but my booking system is just one system. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. Okay. You book a consult, it's all going to be in the same system.
Okay. And we'll link both of the websites below, but you can find Barbara or the information about working with Barbara for past life regressions at regressionaustin.com.
Yeah.
And Barbara, we love to ask our final question.
Okay.
And what does self-love mean to you?
Oh, that's such a good question. I struggled with it for so long, and then I had sort of a breakthrough almost 20 years ago, and it was about accepting all of me. Mm-hmm. And the metaphor that I use for self-love is actually like a planet. I think we're all like planets. And, I used to be so ashamed and afraid of the parts of me we call shadow, or we have ways of talking about our, violence or fear or lust or all the things that humans have. But a planet has volcanoes and dark caves filled with animals that would eat you, but it also has waterfalls and fields of wildflowers, and the whole planet. That's the whole planet, right? You would never say that planet was not worthy of being a planet. And I think we're like that. I'm like that. I'm whole now. And so that for me was just this mind crashing kind of realization that I can be whole and still have these things that are, not for public consumption or even my own sometimes about me, but that the way I grew up you were supposed to be like good and pure as the driven snow and honest and helpful and all the things that we all, like to be and try to be. But there's also the side that you did lie, or you did masturbate, or you did steal the pencil, or you did yell at your friend, or all the things that made me think I was a really bad person, right? And so for me, that self-love was about accepting myself as the whole. And that's my answer.
I love that analogy.
I do
just
too.
that visual. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks for
Amazing.
inviting me.
Thank
Yes.
you so much.
So we'll have everything linked below in the show notes. And
Okay.
if you are interested, you guys, you should really check out her website, her information. If you want to find out more from the books, the Brian Weiss books, you can look at her resources page as well. She has a list of resources to help you start feeling into things.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody so much for being here today. Thank you, Barbara. We were so elated that you said yes.
Oh my gosh.
I'll do this anytime.
Definitely
we get kind of like,
yeah.
Are they gonna say yes?
Yeah, of course.
So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes. And everybody, don't forget to love first,
love last,
and love always. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Hey, listener, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us in this moment. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to our next connection.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow to stay notified of new content from Love Always Self. If you have any questions or topics you'd like for us to discuss, please hit us up on any of our social media platforms linked in the show notes below.
I'm Karista.
And I'm Shira.
And until next time, remember to love first,
love last,
and love always. Love Always Self podcast is meant for entertainment purposes only. We do not make any warranties about the completeness, reliability, and accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. Any action you choose to take upon the information in this podcast is strictly done so at your own risk, and we will not be held liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of our podcast. Any and all medical concerns should be addressed with a licensed healthcare provider, as well as any questions that may be derived from the information discussed in this podcast.